Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam,
And I'm Marcia.
and we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it. Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we're talking about Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, which is a film that came out this year in 2026. It was directed by Tom Harper and written by Stephen Knight. We've talked about some of Stephen Knight's work before when we talked about SAS Rogue Heroes, so definitely go check out those episodes. This film represents the finale of the TV series Peaky Blinders, which ran from 2013 to 2022, which depicts the rise of a fictional Birmingham criminal gang in the 1920s and 30s. The film itself is set during World War II and features the son of main character Tommy Shelby embroiled in a Nazi plot against Britain. And you can watch it on Netflix. What did you think of this movie?
Hated it. Absolutely disliked. Very much. I wanted to love it. Really, I did. I was really excited that they were doing a movie. Even though I had not, I will give you a disclaimer here. I've only seen season 1 and 2, and I have no memory of season 2. So I don't know why that happened. But I really liked season 1. And obviously, I like the universe that it's set in. I'm saying universe like it isn't a real thing, but you know what I mean? I really wanted this movie to be good because obviously it's a World War II movie, so exciting, but it was not. I feel like the writing is all to blame. I'm very sorry, Stephen Knight. I'm not a big fan of this one. How about you?
Yeah, my first thought was, Steven, did someone put a gun to your head and make you make this movie? My God. I would say the last couple of seasons of Peaky Blinders already were, the wheels were coming off a little bit. They were a bit more meh than the earlier seasons. And then I too was excited that the movie was coming out because I was like, great, it's going to be big budget. They're probably going to get a whole bunch of the old actors back. They're going to get people doing cameos. Tom Hardy will be there. It'll be, just like a big event type thing. And, the Peaky Blinders universe will go out with a bang. And then I watched the movie, and some truly wild writing choices were made. Things that were completely out of character or didn't make sense. Like, it felt like it was written by somebody who was not involved in the writing of the first 6 seasons. There's just a total disconnect there. I was not very impressed. They seem to feel this need to wipe out the old generation of Shelby so that they could start fresh with a new generation. And I was like, why do you have to kill up every single character that anybody gives a shit about in order for us to proceed in this universe? I guess you could make the argument that Tommy's arc was only ever going to end that way, but I don't see why everyone else around him had to get dragged down into the mire as well. And I know they had some issues with actors. I know they couldn't get Paul Anderson back, who plays Arthur, which is really unfortunate, I think, because he was such a huge part of what made the show so excellent. But I just feel like maybe don't make the movie then. We could have ended it with season 6. It didn't need the movie, you know?
I watched, Stephen Knight had said, look, before you watch this movie, watch the first episode of season 1, the last episode of season 2, and the last episode of season 6. So that's what I did. And season 6 is the ending of season 6 is fine as an ending. And I was talking to you away from this podcast about how they could have just started a new series and kind of allude to what happened to Tommy Shelby, or even make it a bit of a mystery. It could have been really good to just leave it a mystery for a while. But no, of course they had to close it up like this. And even if Tommy Shelby was going to end up dying, which, seems like he had escaped death so many times, so how many more deaths can you escape? But it wasn't even a good death. I was not impressed with it whatsoever. Nah.
Yeah, the death scene was pretty overwrought and a bit silly, if I may say.
I just want to say, I'm a horse.
Yeah. Some weird choices too in this movie, like, obviously, unfortunately, Helen McCrory is no longer around, so she couldn't be in the movie, and her character, Aunt Polly, was such a massive part of the show, and spoiler alert, they kill off the only other female character of note, Ada, pretty quickly, and they don't even mention Tommy's wife, Lizzie, who left him at the end of season 6. So they bring in this other female character, and there's this whole weird subplot. Rebecca Ferguson is doing her best, but it's just very strange. It's like, why did we get rid of all the female characters anyone cares about and make this whole movie about relationships that were never important to Tommy. I mean, he found out that he had this son, Duke, but making this whole movie around this relationship he has with this son that he doesn't know very well, it was like, this was not something I would have predicted for Tommy based on what we know about him from the series.
No, and also because Tommy doesn't know this boy very much, we also don't know him, so it's hard to care about him in the short span of the movie. And I feel like that for most of the new characters, actually, we don't know any of them. They have no meaning to us or to Tommy Shelby in most cases. They also invented a new enemy to fight, even though there's plenty of existing enemies in, like, even in season 6 that they could have used, even in a World War II setting. So it's just such a shame that it feels really disjointed from the series, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also don't know if they use the backdrop of World War II as effectively as they could have.
Nope.
We'll definitely talk about this some more about what's happening in Birmingham in World War II, but it almost felt like kind of an afterthought, which is unfortunate because, there's so many ways that that could have gone.
I did find a connection for Stephen Knight from an interview with him because his mother apparently worked in the factory that was bombed. So I guess that's an interesting connection. She wasn't there that night, but she did work there. So I do understand that connection, but still, you're right. It feels like World War II is just a convenient thing in this movie. It's not about World War II so much.
Yeah, definitely. And it would have been nice to see them play with themes of, even if Tommy's not passing the torch to his sons, because he does have two, not that you would know it from the movie. There was an era where the Peaky Blinders simply faded from relevance and the torch got passed to other neighborhood gangs. And there's probably a lot of things you could say about aging and remaining connected and vital and relevant in the world and seeing the world change around you and feeling like maybe you're not changing with it. Like there's so many ways that this could have gone that would have been more interesting than the way they did go.
Yeah, I agree. Should we give a little bit of context where the TV show kind of leaves us off and where the movie starts?
Yeah. So our main character, Tommy Shelby, he's led the Shelby crime family and its affiliated gang, the Peaky Blinders in Birmingham, for over 20 years by the time the movie starts. The series initially began in 1919. Tommy and his brothers have just returned from World War One, and they're two-bit gangsters. They run the neighborhood, but they're pretty hard scrabble. And then over the years, they rise to great wealth and power. They attain a seat in parliament. And a major theme of the show has always been family, the only people you can really trust. And so that does pop up in the movie too. Many people dear to Tommy were killed over the course of the show. His wife, Grace, with whom he has a son, Charlie, that we see very briefly, blink and you'll miss it in this film. His younger brother, John, his aunt, Polly, his daughter, Ruby. We see him grieving over her in the movie. The final season of the TV series culminated in him killing his nephew, Michael, with whom he had struggled for power. And his second wife, Lizzie, left him and took his son, Charlie, with her. Tommy has an older son, Duke, from a brief dalliance when he was a young man. Duke only became involved in the Shelby family later. He didn't grow up with Tommy. And as such, he's always been kind of an outsider. That's how the sort of the situation that exists at the beginning of the movie.
And the final scene in season 6 is quite. You think Tommy Shelby's going to die, he's going to kill himself, and then he finds out something about himself that makes him change his mind. And we think he's gonna go back and be Tommy Shelby, the crime boss again. At least that's what I thought was gonna happen. But no, because let's get into the plot. We open on Sachsenhausen concentration camp, where counterfeit British banknotes are being made by the prisoners there. And across the channel in Birmingham, UK, an air raid destroys the BSA munitions factory. The opening cards say, in 1940, the Nazi government forged hundreds of millions of pounds in counterfeit currency. They devised a plan to smuggle it into Great Britain, the last country in Western Europe still standing against fascism. A huge injection of money would flood the banking system, crash the economy, and win the war for Germany. On the night of November 19, 1940, 400 tons of high explosives were dropped on the city of Birmingham by the German Luftwaffe. 53 munitions workers were killed at the BSA factory in Small Heath after deciding not to go to the shelters. Even after the siren sounded, this film honors their memory. It's a long opening card.
It sure is. Now that you mentioned that his mother worked at that factory, I understand why they had the scene where the women go into the factory and then the factory explodes, and then it specifically mentions that this incident happened, but it really has so little to do with the actual action of the movie.
It does, and it does have very little to do with the rest of the movie, which is a shame, isn't it? It would have been nice if it made sense in the actual plot.
I looked into this plan to destabilize the British financial system. So, in 1942, the Nazis revived a defunct plan to flood the British economy with counterfeit notes to destabilize their financial system. The initial plan, when this was first created in, I want to say, the late 1930s, like 1939, maybe 1940, the original plan was to airdrop the banknotes over Britain, which to me is crazy. It's like, that you guys can't even accurately land a bomb, and you're just gonna drop money and hope it doesn't, like, you know, land in a pond or, in a field or somewhere else where it will never be found and be any use to you. But anyway, so obviously they realized that plan was dumb. When they revived it in 1942, they decided that they were gonna be a bit more sneaky about it, and they were going to use these counterfeit notes that they were creating to finance their intelligence operations, paying spies, intelligence agents, buying supplies in Britain using counterfeit notes, that kind of thing. And this was called Operation Bernhard. As they studied authentic British notes, they noted about 150 different security marks, which they then worked to replicate. At this time, the British banknotes had been the same for like 80 years. Out of date, perhaps not as modern with security measures as they could have been. So they ultimately were able to replicate most of these. The Nazis were then able to create printing plates. They experimented until they had the correct paper. Ultimately, 142 Jewish prisoners at Sachsenhausen concentration camp with backgrounds in banking and printing were made to study how to replicate the notes and then went on to manufacture them. And in 1944, they also began experimenting with how to counterfeit US dollars. So we do see that a little bit in the movie. We see the money coming out of Sachsenhausen concentration camp and being taken away on a train. The British had gotten a heads up via intelligence that counterfeit notes were in existence, and they caught the first one officially in 1943. And the gap here was the numbering system. The Germans were trying to figure out how to make new serial numbers that would pass unnoticed through the bank, and they couldn't quite crack it. It was almost like a code. And so they were reusing the serial numbers of old banknotes. The British soon discovered that bills that had been withdrawn from circulation were somehow magically circulating again. So ultimately, they responded to this by withdrawing all banknotes over £5 from circulation. This had a long lasting impact. These notes did not begin to be reintroduced until 1964. So I believe they introduced the £5 note in 64, the £10 note in 71, maybe, and then the £20 note was not until I think maybe 1980. So for quite a long time, they were not generating these notes. So by late 1943, the Germans were churning out 1 million counterfeit bills every month. Some estimates place the total amount of false currency generated during the war at £300 million. The counterfeiters narrowly survived the war when their camp was liberated in 1945. And the story about that is pretty crazy because there was an order that came down that was like, we don't want the Allies to know what we were doing. Take all of these counterfeiters that we have in this camp and execute them all together. And because Germans are so letter of the law about everything, when all of these guys came through and were at this large concentration camp towards the end of the war, they couldn't find them all. And so they're like, well, we can't kill them all together. Ergo, we can't kill the ones that we have because we can't find the other guys. And so ultimately, the execution was delayed for long enough that the camp was liberated and these guys survived the war. And a few years later, the remaining counterfeit notes that the Jewish prisoners had continued making up until the spring of 1945 were found at the bottom of a lake with a face value of £9 million. So that's pretty interesting.
That's wild, though. I mean, thank God German logic held up there. Otherwise, these men would have been dead. And I reckon that the fact that they were making counterfeit bills is also what kept them alive for so long. So, in a way, it saved them, which is weird to think about. Isolated on his country estate for some reason, one-time leader of the Peaky Blinders, Tommy Shelby, played by the impeccable Cillian Murphy, struggles to pen his autobiography for some reason that he's writing that we've never seen him write whatsoever. But I guess He's a writer now, and he's haunted literally by many ghosts, including his daughter, Ruby, and the memory of his dead brother, Arthur, who was killed between the ending of the TV show and the beginning of this movie sometime. So, he's not having a good time in this estate. The only man that's still with him is his name Johnny? I think his name is Johnny. And that was weird too. I thought the whole thing was weird. Especially because in the very beginning, they have a conversation that is clearly meant to update anyone who's never seen Peaky Blinders about what happens in Peaky Blinders. And it just felt really explanatory to me in a way that I don't like in movies. But maybe that's just me.
So many wild writing choices were made. I mean, Tommy Shelby, who has always been a bruiser. I mean, a smart bruiser, for sure, a very cunning bruiser, but a bruiser nonetheless, suddenly deciding that he wants to sit down and write an autobiography. And I totally understand the concept of like, this is a guy who is even more closed down than your average 1940s man about his emotions. And if he's not writing it down, then we're never going to get to know his inner thoughts and feelings. But I don't know, man. It just felt clunky. It didn't feel like this device seamlessly fit into the story at all. The fact that they killed Arthur off in between the end of the show and the beginning of the movie felt just wild to me because Arthur is such an intrinsic part of the show. I mean, for me, Arthur was my favorite character because you really never knew what to expect. You know, he was always into shenanigans, always getting into trouble, and he was just such a core part of Tommy's life. And then to have it be like, well, we couldn't get the actor, so we killed him off in the strangest way imaginable. Just I don't know, it rang false to me.
Yeah, we'll get to it when we get to the revelation about how he dies, I guess. But I also thought this, and it's so easy to come up with another excuse for him not to be there, too. I mean, he is a bit of an unstable character, so I reckon it wouldn't have been that difficult to find a reason for him not to be there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, and even season 6 ended where Tommy was taking himself off into the wilderness to kill himself because he thought he had this fatal brain disease. You could have just been like, Arthur thought Tommy killed himself, so he killed himself. Because Arthur even says something at their last dinner together where he says something about how Tommy won't be gone very long before Arthur comes after or something. I'm paraphrasing heavily. I don't remember what the exact line was, but it would not have been completely out of line to be like, yeah, Arthur lost his emotional rock and he couldn't cope and he killed himself. I mean, this is a guy with a long history of substance abuse and really struggling to make sense of his experience in World War One. So it just wouldn't be that wild to be like, yeah, unfortunately, he battled with mental illness and did not win.
I think he says something along the lines of, I'll soon be where you are. And that's when Ada also asks where he's going. So he's not telling anyone where he's going. And Arthur has already left him at that point because he doesn't want to say goodbye. And that kind of weirds her out. Because Arthur knows what he's going to do as the only member of the family. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Just everything about this movie is weird. I'm so sorry, Stephen. I really just, I can't.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Tommy's sister Ada, played by Sophie Rundle, one of the few actors to come back from the TV show, breaks his solitude in the countryside to report that his son Duke, recast since season 6 with Barry Keoghan, has used the air raid on the factory to steal munitions and attack munitions workers. And it's revealed that Duke runs the Peaky Blinders now in Tommy's absence, but he's willing to cross lines that Tommy never would have crossed.
I have something to say about this, about Barry Keoghan, because I was really excited that he was going to be in it, because he's kind of kooky and crazy and terrifying sometimes. But he was not as terrifying as I thought he was going to be in this movie. I was even a little bit disappointed. I feel like he, like Stephen Graham, who's also in this movie later, if acting ability feels a bit underused in the movie, I think he could have been much scarier. He still kind of feels like a boy to me. And I wanted him to be a psycho, and he wasn't so much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he and Cillian Murphy both have weird faces, so you could see how you could draw the link of them being genetically related. But I agree, I've seen better work from Barry Keoghan.
Yeah, I think it's a writing. Sorry, Stephen Knight.
Shall we talk about the Peaky Blinders?
Let's.
So the show begins in 1919 and proceeds until World War II, as we said in the beginning. But the real Birmingham Peaky Blinders had their heyday a little earlier in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, so they kind of finished off around World War One. They emerged from a society facing worsening economic inequality during the Industrial Revolution, where slums expanded and violence and crime erupted. These are young men who don't have access to good paying jobs. They know that they'll never get out of the class situation that they're in, and so they resort to crime. And cities were divided into gang territories, complete with gang wars, and the Peaky Blinders were, a major component of this in Birmingham at that time. And though they were known for wearing the peaked flat cap, like in the show, it's unlikely that razors were sewn into the fabric for the simple reason that you would probably cut your hands up and it doesn't really make a lot of sense as a weapon. So this is probably one of those mythical things that got passed down, the sort of legend that grows up around the scary neighborhood gang type of thing. And the phrase Peaky Blinders became kind of a catch-all for thugs and antisocials of all kinds operating in Birmingham. There were names for similar criminal types in large cities across the UK. In fact, this is the era where the word hooligan emerged. And like Tommy, many of the real Peaky Blinders retreated to the countryside as their power waned and other dangerous criminal cartels moved in to claim their territory.
Yeah, I also read somewhere that sewing razor blades into their caps would have been too expensive for them as well. Like, apparently it was expensive to do, so it's not as likely that they would have done that.
Right, you're not going to the pharmacy like you would today and buying a whole bunch of disposable razors, right? If you're a working class person, you probably don't have a lot of extra ones lying around.
No, exactly. I also found out from my research into Stephen Knight is that his mother was a child runner for one of the illegal betting agencies when she was young. So I guess that's where all his inspiration came from to do this.
Yeah, I mean, that's kinda neat.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense then why especially in the beginning of the show, why it's so good. For me, a huge part of the appeal of the show is also the aesthetics of the series, and I feel like in the movie, as much as I wanted it to be, I'm just going to be negative about this again, aren't I? But even the styling in this wasn't as good as in the original show. I was kind of bored with all the choices they made.
I know. I really liked in the original show how every season they would up the ante a little bit. They'd get a little more brutal looking. They would get cleaner, neater, more expensive lines of their suits and that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I used to just get really excited to see what like the new vibe would be in a new season, and then this didn't really build on season 6 in any appreciable way that I noticed.
No, I'm just disappointed.
Me too.
We meet the big bad of this movie. It's Nazi agent John Beckett, played by Tim Roth, and he recruits Duke into a plan to distribute the counterfeit money throughout the UK. Especially, I think, in Liverpool for some reason. And in exchange for the Peaky Blinders' biggest payout ever, £70 million.
Yeah, Duke is pretty stoked about this because he's like, "My dad never made 70 million pounds." And it's like, bro, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
He was such a boy again, and he wasn't as confident as I thought he was going to be. Like, if you're gonna make him the new Tommy Shelby, at least make him as cool and collected as Tommy Shelby, but he really isn't. He's kind of unsure and he looks kind of nervous and scared sometimes, and I didn't like it.
Yeah, I think I would have liked if there was a little more indication in season 6 of the show that this is where they were going.
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen the last episode, so I had no idea who this kid was.
Yeah, John Beckett was a real person. He was a former Labour Party MP and he joined the British Union of Fascists in the 1930s. Even if you're only a casual history listener, if you watched the earlier seasons of Peaky Blinders, you'll remember Oswald Mosley as an antagonist for Tommy Shelby. Oswald Mosley was a real British fascist, and he was the sort of person who was in charge of the British Union of Fascists. And so John Beckett had a falling out with Oswald Mosley, and he became one of the founders of Britain's first Nazi Party in 1937, alongside William Joyce, Lord Haha himself. John Beckett left the party the following year and led a new far right party called the British People's Party. It's just really cracking me up how these fascists just can't get along. And ultimately, he was imprisoned under special wartime rules in 1940 after being implicated in a plot to set up a government in cooperation with the Nazis once Britain was conquered by Germany.
Interesting. I thought in the movie he was kind of a weak villain, to be honest. I thought he feels to me more like a lackey than anything else.
Yeah, he was pretty stereotypical and almost cartoonish. There's an article by his son, journalist Francis Beckett, in The Guardian, in which he decried the portrait of his father in the film as a one-dimensional villain undone by a plucky band of unlikely heroes. And he basically said, "We live in a post-truth world. For Donald Trump, as for more and more far-right leaders, truth is whatever it suits him to say it is. Now more than ever, we should look unflinchingly at our history. We should not create heroic myths. That's what Nazis do."
And he's correct.
I mean, Tommy Shelby's always been a sort of anti-hero, but he certainly hasn't always been a good guy who does good things. And by setting up this, this over-the-top Nazi as his final villain to defeat, and, he's doing it for the classic reasons of God and country or whatever. I don't know, man. It just felt like it was not really in keeping with who we know Tommy Shelby to be. It was kind of just a pat ending, and it did this thing that we're always talking about where it's like, "Cool, so the bad guy's a Nazi, you don't have to do any more work creating that character, it's just shorthand for bad, and it makes everyone who opposes him an automatic hero," you know?
Yeah, and I guess that was one of the strengths, I think, of the series is that Tommy Shelby is still a criminal. You feel for him, but a lot of the things he does and his family does feels evil. And especially in the beginning, there was a pretty three-dimensional character. And they've kind of flattened the entire thing for the good guys and the bad guys. It's suddenly become really black and white. And it's just no longer as interesting either from a narrative point of view. Like, make it questionable, make it exciting. It's so boring.
Yeah, for sure. We lost a lot of this gray, swirling, murky moral nuance that we had in earlier seasons of Peaky Blinders.
Yeah. Beckett has Duke kill a loose-lipped fellow collaborator in a very brutal way. He makes him shoot him 8 times or something silly like that. Then he has to do something he doesn't want to do. At least we don't know this yet. He has to kill his aunt Ada because, as Sam said, they just want to kill every single female character so they can introduce new ones that we don't care about. And because she is trying to deliver testimony about his munition stealing to the military police. And I also, because I've not seen the entire show, I kind of didn't really know that Ada had gone into politics, which I think she has, right? She's a politician at this point.
Yeah, so Tommy Shelby was the member of parliament for whatever their electoral riding is called in Birmingham. And then I think the idea is that when he fucked off to his country estate to write his autobiography or whatever, she took over the seat.
I really liked Ada in the earlier seasons. She was kind of the one who was a little bit on the outside of the family, and that made her interesting. And I don't know if I like her being all the way on the other end of it, like on the good guy's side as much. I don't know if that sounds weird because I haven't seen the rest of the show, so maybe it does make sense in the longer run. But I don't know, I thought she was also kind of one-dimensional at this point.
Yeah, I really would have liked if we'd had more time to see Ada getting to be a little bit of a crooked politician. I think that would have been a lot of fun. We were talking about this offline, but when I rewatched the pilot, it really struck me how young Ada was and how naive and how really not involved in the criminal underworld with her brothers that she was, and how much that's changed over the course of the show as she became older and more jaded and more involved in the criminal enterprise. Yeah, I think it would have been fun to allow her to have a bit of a good time being a politician, not necessarily walk the straight and narrow, but do the typical Shelby family anti-hero thing. And I guess I will say that it's kind of interesting to see that with Tommy out of the picture, no one can really control Duke. And so the only method that she can see of trying to get a handle on him is the legal venue, which is kind of really interesting for a woman who grew up learning the rather hard lesson that oftentimes only the crooked sideways, left hand route is actually going to work for anyone.
Yeah, I thought it was funny because obviously the fashion in the 40s is really interesting. And Ada, she looks what I imagine is a caricature of a British spy. Like, she looks really sleek and fashionable, and she's got like a white brimmed hat on, and she looks beautiful. But I kind of miss the Birmingham in her at this point. She's become this really like classy. I miss kind of the wink at who she used to be. But
Yeah, and if this had been a whole season, hopefully we really would have gotten to explore that a lot more.
right, then it would have been a journey that she went on, and we went on it with her. But right now, we just got thrown into it, and it feels kind of caricaturish to me.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on the country estate, buckle in because Tommy is visited by the sister of Duke's mother, a Roma woman called Cowlo, played by Rebecca Ferguson. She is sometimes herself and she is sometimes the ghost of her dead sister. Anyway, it's a whole thing. And she convinces him to return to Birmingham to bail Duke out of the situation that he's in.
I just laughed at this entire interaction between her and Tommy because she is a Roma woman who does seances and talks to the dead and all that sort of stuff. And Duke's mother was her twin, so they would have looked alike. And the way they show her changing from one person to the other is by moving the camera around Tommy. First it's on her, then they move around Tommy, and they change the direction of her brain to indicate that she's the other sister, and it just made me laugh. It's so weird.
Yes.
And then they have sex, because apparently she needs to remind Tommy of the man he was before he got all soft, and he needs sex with her, this woman, to make him realize, she says. And I don't know, I hated that, to be honest. I hated that for Rebecca Ferguson, who is a phenomenal actress, just not in this role, and it's not her fault.
Yeah, I really didn't think they gave her much to work with.
No.
Yeah.
Duke realizes that he's unable to kill Ada at the very last moment. He even calls out to her to warn her. Unfortunately, Beckett shows up because somehow he has seen, I don't know how, that Duke can't do it. So he's like, if you cannot do it, I'm very disappointed in you, but I'm gonna do it. And he shoots Ada. Ada's with her son, Carl, who was named after Karl Marx. And this is the first and only time we see him in this movie. It's kind of sad to see her die this way. And it's just, I don't know what they were trying to do with Beckett and Duke, where he's pretending to be this father type figure and saying he's disappointed in him like he's his father. And it's just so weird. And also, I don't think it's a strong plot point for them to have to kill Ada. Like, there are other ways of stopping her from taking that testimony to the military police. But I guess we need to wipe the slate clean.
Yeah, it sucked because I don't know, man. She doesn't even go out on her own terms. Like she does it's the classic thing where the woman has to die so that the nearest men can have their character arc move forward, and I just hate that. It just feels weak.
Yeah, I didn't like this either. And she turns around to look at Dirk, so she gets shot in the back. And I don't like it. I feel like she deserved a better ending than this.
Yeah, it's not great. And then, of course, her ghost appears to Tommy on the road as he's driving, and he gets to feel all this guilt because he didn't come to Birmingham when she asked him. Then he could have prevented this from happening, and he didn't. So, classic. Good thing Ada died for that. We see quite a lot of rubble and devastation from the German Blitz during this scene. Ada's clambering over the rubble in her fancy shoes. Birmingham was an industrial center and the site of significant wartime industry. So they were building Spitfires, they were building tanks, they were building munitions, you name it. And thus it was a prime target for bombing. It attracted the third most amount of German bombs after London and Liverpool. So as you can imagine, much of the city was flattened. The Germans conducted 77 air raids over the city between 1940 and 1942. Over 2,000 people were killed and many more were injured or left homeless. And so this movie really takes place in this really strange time in people's lives where you get up in the morning and you still have to go to work and you still have to take care of the children and you still have to do all the normal stuff. But then maybe tonight you don't get any sleep because you have to sleep in an air raid shelter. And maybe you'll be unexpectedly homeless. Maybe you won't have access to utilities for a few weeks. Maybe you have food insecurity. Maybe you can't access services. Hospitals are really overburdened. The child mortality rate goes up in this time. And so this is a really extraordinary time in people's lives, and I think they could have made better use of this as a background for the movie.
I agree. Birmingham is such a character in the show, and it kind of got lost again in this one. I'm trying to remember if I have anything good to say about this movie because I do sound like a bit of a broken record.
Upon learning about Beckett, Tommy immediately goes to visit Ada's body at the mortuary, knowing that Beckett will likely turn up in an attempt to kill him as well. This is where he confesses to Ada's corpse that he killed Arthur and it wasn't an accident. He and Beckett then have a shootout with no winners. They basically just chase each other around and there's some bang, bang, bang that happens.
We get to see a real Sten gun and enjoyed that for a bit. But what a character assassination for Tommy Shelby to have him kill his brother out of rage and drunkenness. That seems so unlike Tommy Shelby to me.
No, especially because Arthur has been a massive pain in the ass for years. And so if Tommy never killed him before, he's not about to start now. And I just when it turned out that he killed Arthur, I was like, okay, maybe a drunken fight. They were wrestling for the gun. I don't love it, but I could see it. And then when it turns out that he did it on purpose because he was just sick of him, I was like, my Tommy Shelby in a show about how family is more important than anything kills his brother off screen? I don't buy it.
Yeah, no. It could have been like at first he tells Carla, what's her name? That it's an accident that he did kill him, but it wasn't on purpose, and that would have been fine. And like you said, even a suicide would have been kind of a logical choice for Arthur Shelby. Shelby had enough demons. He didn't need to have this one as well.
I know, especially because there really wasn't time to explore it very much. And I just think if you're gonna have a death this momentous, it simply has to be boring if it's happening off screen. Like, you can't be like, "Yeah, this crazy death happened and you never got to see it anyway." If they were like, "Oh, he died by suicide, unfortunately, it happened off screen," you'd be like, "Alright, that's allowed." But you can't have one brother killing the other and they're like, "Yeah, you never saw it anyway."
Yeah, no, it's a shame. Tommy learns that the counterfeit money will be arriving via Liverpool and he connects with dockyard boss Hayden Stagg, played by Stephen Graham. He comes up with a plan to destroy the money Beckett at the same time. Stephen Graham is a great actor. He's also underused in this. Like, he looks like he belongs here, but it's like, he has about 4 lines of dialogue and that's it.
No, I do agree. They could have made much more use of him because he's a terrific actor. So that is one thing I will say about this movie. Thank you for putting Stephen Graham in it.
Yeah, it's great. Like he looks like he's from that era as well. He's got a certain face that looks like it belongs in that like the 20s to the 40s for some reason.
Yeah, the, doesn't know what an iPhone looks like face. Behind Tommy's back, Paolo instructs Duke to ally with his father just long enough to get rid of Beckett and then to turn around and kill his father so that Duke can run the Peaky Blinders unobstructed. Accordingly, Duke calls Beckett to inform him of what his father is planning. He's in a phone booth and he's like, by the way, my dad's planning to fuck you over.
I did think maybe I'll give Stephen one thumbs up for making Duke make this decision based on a coin toss, which is something that Tommy Shelby does, and I like that connection between the two. And I guess also for me, I wasn't sure what he decided, so I wasn't sure if he was playing Beckett or if he was playing Tommy, so I wasn't sure what was going on, which I like. Like, I like that kind of mystery. So I'll give him that.
I will say, I almost feel like Stephen Knight wrote himself into a little bit of a corner with Tommy Shelby because anytime there's a situation where there's a double cross, I'm like, it's not going to work. Tommy's too smart. He'd never fall for it. So anytime there's a situation like this where it's like, well, maybe he's going behind Tommy's back, I'm like, even if he is, Tommy knows. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I guess they did it for, what's his face? The one that died in episode 6 of season
Michael.
6.
Michael.
Michael, yeah, because he also tries to double cross him, and it just doesn't work. Like, he always knows. He's too cunning. You cannot fool this man. That's what makes him interesting as well. But it also means that if you do that too many times, it stops being interesting.
Right, exactly. Tommy's plan involves sending a group of thugs on barges to battle with Beckett's Nazi agents. However, It turns out that he knows that Beckett has been informed of his plan, of course. So he rigs the barges with explosives. And the plan is that all the Peaky Blinders men will disembark before the barges blow up so that only the Nazi agents will be killed. Meanwhile, Tommy descends into the tunnels below the city, which is, by the way, a big deal because he was a tunneler in World War I and he used to have all this PTSD and all these nightmares about it. With the goal of surprising and killing Beckett before the explosion can occur, because once the explosion occurs, obviously Beckett will be aware of Tommy and Duke's ruse, and so he wants to get there before that happens, thereby saving Duke from Beckett's likely retribution.
I don't know how I feel about this PTSD still being there. It's a recurring theme in the show, and I see what he was trying to do with it sending him into a tunnel. I just don't know if it works for me. Also because they give him so much shit to deal with in this movie. Like, he's got all his ghosts, and then he also still got PTSD, so I'm like, maybe pick PTSD and stop bothering me with all this ghost nonsense.
Yeah, there's lots going on. The other thing that I thought was sort of a missed mark as well was his son Charlie with his first wife Grace. He only appears super, super briefly in the movie right at the end. And the reason why is because he is a soldier and he's off fighting in North Africa. And Tommy Shelby has so many, World War One for him. It's just such a big, silent presence at the center of everything that he is and everything that he does. I mean, they talk quite extensively, at least in the earlier seasons, about how Tommy before the war used to be a guy who liked horses and he laughed a lot and he was pretty, lighthearted. And then World War One really changed him as a person and made him really hard. It would have been really interesting to get some sense of what he thought about one of his sons, taking up the mantle and becoming a soldier. And we don't get anything about that.
I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to wrap this show up as a whole thing. But yeah, it's such a shame, man. I would have been fine with just season 6 and nothing else. The barges explode as planned against this factory, and Tommy's men kill the Nazi agents with relative ease. The tunnel caves in as Tommy's in it, which is traumatic as hell, and it results in Tommy arriving late. Not unlike the time this happened with Lizzie in season 2, episode 6, I believe. Although, this time he's in time to prevent the worst from happening and Duke being killed. Duke did not kill Tommy, couldn't do it. Which kind of tells you he's a Shelby after all, because all they care about is family. And he also keeps saying, I will never kill my kin. So I guess he kind of sets it up right in the beginning, and he kind of sticks with it. And then we see Tommy with a mine, a landmine that we've seen before in other movies. The Duke has no idea what it is, and he destroys the counterfeit money with it by blowing it up.
Yeah, hero shit.
Hero shit!
Tommy gets shot twice by Beckett, but he still manages to kill him. Beckett is speeding towards him in a vehicle, and Tommy is able to shoot him in the face. Duke pushes him out of the way of the speeding car, but he's been shot a couple times. It's too late to save him. Duke kills him with a mercy bullet, while Tommy recites a verse that is a longtime favorite of the Shelby family in the bleak midwinter.
Every time he starts to recite this poem in the earlier seasons, he thinks he's going to die, but he doesn't. And this
Right.
is when he finally does. I didn't like him begging his son to kill him so much. I didn't like it. I was like, leave the boy alone. Why give your son this trauma?
Yeah. They also made such a big deal out of it in season 6 that the only one who could kill Tommy Shelby was Tommy Shelby. And then to end it this way, again, it just felt a little lazy to me.
And I also didn't like very much. Obviously, Polly was a seer, right? I don't know if they call it a seer in the series or not. But they give this to Carlo and they treat it like it's something obvious. And I don't know, this character of Carlo, she doesn't mean anything to any of us watching it because she's brand new. Like her predictions, I don't care about them. When Polly makes them, you're like, you gotta believe her and you trust her to you want to trust her word because you know that she means business all the time. And when this character does it, it feels so empty to me.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was, so Ada comes to his country estate and tries to get him to come to Birmingham. he could have just as easily gone to Birmingham with Ada, so Cowlow not necessary to the plot there, and then we could have seen Duke wrestle with the idea of being on his father's side or not being on his father's side, completely independent of Cowlow's involvement, and so I really feel like they just wrote her in because they're like, "Dang, we killed off our last female character, we probably should have a lady in here," but she doesn't really contribute anything meaningful.
No, and even Tommy's Romani heritage, they could have done it for that, and they don't even explore what it means to him in this movie. So, I mean, if you're gonna introduce a Romani character in this, at least make Tommy feel some sort of way about it, other than, oh, this is the twin sister of a woman that I slept with once.
Right, and part of me is also like, it's 2026, are we not past the era of, like, not hiring a Roma actor? Like, I understand that Rebecca Ferguson is a great actor, but it's like, at this point, I don't know, they're pretty fast and loose with the word gypsy, which a lot of Roma people don't like. They consider it to be a slur. Obviously, none of the actors are Roma. They don't have any Roma writers on the show. As far as I know, Roma people were not consulted. The language that they speak is Romanian. It's not even any kind of Roma language, and so it really just feels like they took all these stereotypes about a culture that they don't really know anything about, and they used them in these movies, and then they were like, "Okay, let's introduce this white lady who, is not that we know is not Roma, and she can play this character who has visions and lives in a caravan, etcetera."
Yeah, it feels kind of disrespectful for sure to an entire culture that is also marginalized a lot. Like, still to this day, I think. It's no fun being a quote unquote gypsy because people just have all these sort of ideas about you that stem from racism. So, yeah, it's a weird choice, man. I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I really thought if anything at this point, they would have leaned away from talking about Tommy Shelby's so-called Roma heritage at this point and just tried to be like, "Well, that's a thing we did in the past. We don't talk about it that much." And they're like, "No, it's bigger and more important than ever."
What remains of Tommy's family, which is not a lot, but including his two sons, burn his family as custom in a cart on top of a hill somewhere. And a voiceover from Tommy's autobiography emphasizes the importance he always placed on family and how he looks forward to being reunited with them. He says something along the lines of, "We were three brothers and we're now together again," so it feels almost like a happy end, at least for Tommy.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
And that's the end of the movie. It ends with music. I want to say something about the music. I thought there was too much modern music in this. It kept, like, taking me out of the movie. Music is a big part of the show, and the music, especially in the earlier seasons, is really good at setting the mood. And they tried to do that in this movie as well, but for me, it was all a little bit too emo. Instead of being cool and gangstery, it just turned really emo.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. It left me thinking because it's been so long since I've watched the show, it left me wondering, was the show like this and I just don't remember? I was like, why are there these songs playing that are so discordant with what I think should be happening right now?
I just watched the entirety of season 1 and part of season 2 leading up to this because I just wanted to watch season 1 and season 2 again. What they did with the music is use it sparingly in very important moments of these characters' lives. And because they did use it so sparingly, they were all very good and like deliberate, and I don't know what else to say about it. But in the movie, there's just a song every like 5 minutes. There will be another song, so I felt like it was just kind of overused.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
I have some notes. I looked up some facts about Romani people during World War II. So this is a sort of an estimation that was made by in part by the Encyclopedia of Nazi Genocide of the Sinti and Roma in Europe. So that's a big organization. And they estimate that there were about 45,000 Roma living in England at the start of World War II. And they didn't have it as bad as they did in occupied Europe, thank God. But they did face some challenges during World War II because they were marginalized, obviously. And they also had low literacy. But despite that, both Romanian men and women made significant contributions to the war. They joined the military and the auxiliary services, and they worked in war production like in the factories or in forestry or agriculture. And some of them are even decorated. So I found one note about this flying ace that was apparently Romani, and I haven't been able to find a second source to confirm that for me, but I'm just gonna tell you his story anyway. His name was Eric Stanley Locke, and he was a fighting ace that received the Distinguished Flying Cross, and later a bar was added to that, which basically means that he got it a second time. And he was also awarded the Distinguished Service Order, and on August 3rd, 1941, he saw a column of German troops and vehicles on the road near Pas-de-Calais, and he was seen leaving his formation to attack this column, and then he was never seen again, and his plane was never found. So it's kind of a mystery, but he was believed to have been shot down by ground fire, but it just made me really sad that he was never found. But apparently he was a really good fighter pilot, so I thought I would tell you his story.
That's really cool.
I wish there was more to be found by Roma people, but I think a lot of their contributions will be written in family histories and all that sort of thing, but not so much in the general history books,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And like you say, there's still so much stigmatization and marginalization of Roma people. I was in Germany a few years ago and was talking to a tour guide who just said blatantly racist shit about Romani people to my face. Just like cheerfully, like it was just run of the mill, like obviously these people are like this and this and this. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? It was just so wild to me that it was just such an everyday, like, cultural thing.
The second there's a stereotype that's untrue, it just gets reinforced by people just repeating it all the time. And I'm sure that still happens to Romani people today. It's such a shame. We have to rate this movie, but before we do, I would like to remind you that you can follow us wherever you get your podcast, rate us 5 stars, leave us a review, or send this episode to a friend.
Every time you send this episode to a friend, Arthur Shelby returns from the grave and stuffs Stephen Knight into a locker.
I mean, I'll go with that. Yeah, go share it, guys. We can get to the rating now. I have an idea for the rating. I think we should rate this coin tosses out of 10 because I like it. It's the one thing I like about this movie, so give me this.
Okay, sure. How many coin tosses out of 10 would you rate this movie?
I would give it 4 coin tosses out of 10. Which is not a very good rating. I hated everything about it except for the actors. Yeah, can't really say anything else about it that I haven't already said. I just feel like a Debbie Downer. But that's also because I was so hopeful for it, so my hopes just got destroyed. And I'm sad. How about you?
Yeah. So I watched this movie one night after I'd had some wine and I was like, wasn't really keen on that. But then I woke up the next morning and I'm like, well, I got to write notes anyway for the podcast. So maybe I'll throw it on again and maybe I'll like it more. Maybe I'm just not remembering some stuff in it that was good. And then I watched it again and I was like, nope, I was right the first time. Really unnecessary. If you're gonna rewatch the series, skip the movie. You don't need to watch it. I don't know if their plan is to make more Peaky Blinders after this with Barry Keoghan as the star or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the story was done and this was unnecessary. So I'm going to rate it. I'll give it 4.5 coin tosses out of 10.
That's more than me.
I know. It gets an extra half a coin toss because Stephen Graham is in there.
I mean, that's fair, actually. I feel like he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for a character that has, 2 lines.
Exactly.
Are you reading anything interesting this week?
I am. I am reading The Odyssey by Homer, of course, but the translation is the Samuel Butler one. And I have never read it before, so I'm just trying to kind of get around to some books that have been on my list for a long time. I'm enjoying it. How about you?
I am still reading my book that I've been reading for weeks, but I only have about 80 pages left, so I think this is the last week I'll be reading this book.
Nice.
Because I have to talk about it in my book club on Saturday. And we're recording on Tuesday, so I have a couple more days. And I kind of forgot, but it's our 2-year anniversary in this episode.
Hell yeah. Hooray.
I mean, we're not doing a very uplifting movie that we're very excited about. But I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah, but sometimes you gotta trash a movie, and sometimes that's fun too.
yeah, I will say that if Steve and I ever want to come talk to us about SAS, we love SAS.
We'll have to put a thing at the beginning of this episode. If you're Stephen Knight, turn it off now.
Disclaimer. But other than that, I'm not reading anything new yet. I don't know what I'm going to read because obviously this book will be finished and then I'll have to read something new. So I don't know. Maybe I'll read something podcast related. Speaking of which, what were you reading just before this? Because you were reading something related to our next episode.
Yeah, I was reading The Thin Red Line by James Jones, which I finally got through. It's like 500 pages, which privately I think is a little too long. But anyway, I'm done it now.
Yeah, so that's what's on the agenda for next week. So I would say tune in again next week. Thank you for listening. You can follow us wherever you get your podcast and rate us 5 stars. You can send this episode to a friend. You can Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer podcast. You can buy some merchandise. Or you can visit our website where you can find the merchandise link. Okay, see you next week.
Bye.